Hi there, it's Phoenix Jira. This time, we're going to talk about homeowners associations. Woo! I know, that sounds pretty exciting, doesn't it? Several years ago, we moved into a neighborhood that was classified as a subdivision. So we move into this neighborhood, and I'm thinking to myself, I do not want to be restricted in ways that I'm not in control of, or at least have a say in. So I figured my best bet was to become a member of the HOA, get on the board. So at the annual HOA meeting, which is one that all homeowners can attend, I went to that one and I listened to what they said. And at the very end, they say, "Who wants to join?" And I raised my hand. And they were very excited because I think they had 4 members at the time and 1 person had quit. So I get on the HOA and start going to their monthly meetings. The next year, the president resigned because they were doing something else, and a new president was elected, and a vice president, and I became the secretary, and there was one other position. So there were literally 4 or 5 of us. I just want to point out that it doesn't matter how many people are on the board. You could have 3 people on the board. You could have 30 people on the board. The board still gets to make the decisions. So if you live in a subdivision that has an HOA, you might want to consider getting on that board. One of the things about this subdivision to keep in mind is that it had roughly 150 houses. It only had 2 parks, and there were no awesome features. No pool, no clubhouse, nothing like that. It had 1 park with a basketball court that no one ever used, and the other park had a broken down swing set and playground set that people used, but it was really kind of dangerous. So I was on the board, I think 3 years before we ultimately moved. But in that time, some decisions were made. And what are we going to spend the money on? What can't we spend the money on? Are we going to raise the dues? Are we going to do some summer events and things like that? So as we went along, we actually did some improvements to how the board worked and had to raise dues. Now, just so you know, homeowners association board members are not supposed to take any money at all. This is volunteer. They don't get paid out of the dues that you pay. They better not. And they don't get any special concessions. It's not like they don't get out of paying their dues. I always had to pay my dues, and I didn't get any money. Now, this neighborhood had been around for 13 or 14 years, and they had raised the dues once in that entire time. Now, as a homeowner, you're like, yes, yeah. I mean, it was nothing. It was like $280 a year for the HOA due, which is great, right? Especially since they don't have anything. All you have to do is, fix the fences, make sure the roads are in good condition, make sure the lights are running, make sure that there are no problems at the park, those types of things. And there are always taxes. So the fees were going to the place they were supposed to go. But the problem is that taxes increase, the cost of fixing fences increase, how all that stuff went up in cost, but less money was coming in because more money was going out. So we ultimately had to raise the dues. But we went from $280 to, I think it was $310 a year. So whoop-de-doo. It was still a good deal. We started doing these events in the summer where we would have a barbecue. The board members would put on the barbecue. We'd cook the meal. We would order a bouncy house, all that sort of stuff. And one year, this lady comes over and she's like, we should get a pool. No one's using this park for anything else. Why don't we get a pool? And we're like, well, the dues would have to go up. Well, what do you mean? Well, you're paying $280 a year, and we don't have a pool. If we add a pool, the cost of putting the pool in is going to be thousands of dollars, and then maintaining it will also be a lot of money every year. So the $280 you're paying a year, you'll probably be paying like $300 to $350 a month, which she didn't understand. My experience with an HOA wasn't too bad. It wasn't actually too bad. There were a couple of times when the other lady that was on the board with me, that we had to tell the others, no, we're not doing that. We do not need to fine people because their garbage can is out. We do not need to go knocking on their door because they didn't put their garbage can behind the gate. Now, I know that the rules said that your garbage can was supposed to be behind the gate. Okay, but I'm not going to fine somebody because they forgot, or they were sick, or they just didn't do it. It's a garbage can, for crying out loud. On the other hand, we had people who would have their cars up on blocks for a couple of weeks. And I was like, we need to do something about that, because that's definitely in the rules. You know, if you have to put your car up on blocks because you're fixing it, they usually would tell the HOA, hey, I'm working on my car. One of the guys one time went over to one of my neighbor's house. She had her garage door open. Okay, and she's sitting in her garage. And he walks on in the garage. Hey, I'm so-and-so. And she's like, okay. And he goes, well, I'm sure you know who I am. And she's like, no. Oh, well, I'm one of the HOA board members, and proceeds to tell her that she can't have her trailer parked in her driveway. I'm like, what the hell are you doing? If you really want to talk to them, first of all, don't just invite yourself into the garage. And second of all, find out what's going on. In her particular case, this trailer was not out very often, and she used it for work. So it wasn't just parked there and staying there, like months on end. It was actually being used. It's like, no, you don't get to do that. You're not a hall monitor. Do not do that. So that's one of the reasons I was on the board. It's one of the reasons others should be on the board. I had a friend of mine who told me her homeowners association was so bad that they would literally come and knock on her door if one of her lights were burnt out on her garage. I'm like, no. And when she told me that, that's one of the reasons I got on the board. Because if you are a board member, you can help to change the rules or at least sway them. One of my coworkers lived in a subdivision with an HOA that decided they wanted to get a new pool. Now, I had mentioned that in ours, there was a lady who wanted us to get a pool, but we're like, not unless you want to pay $300 or $400 a month. But in this case, they were going to put in a pool, and it was going to be like this big pool, fancy clubhouse, all this stuff. And it was going to increase, the yearly fee. I think it was triple. And there were 4 or 5 people on the board, and they were making the decision. And unless you're paying attention as a homeowner, those decisions can be made right under your nose. And you'll be like, what the hell? How is it that my fee went from, let's say $100 a month to $400 a month? How come that happened, and why is that okay? Well, because you weren't paying attention to the smallest government known to man, called an HOA, that can literally have anywhere from 1 person to 3 people to 10 people, any number of people making a decision against your livelihood, basically. And here's another thing to keep in mind. If you're in an HOA and they're not charging enough money, or they haven't been banking enough savings and something bad happens, you as a homeowner will have to pay for that. Maybe a sinkhole came and it just right there in the center. And whatever insurance you have doesn't cover that, or doesn't cover it all. It could happen. Well, you're going to have to pay for that. How do I know that? Because again, I had another friend and they lived in a subdivision where they paid a lot of money and something bad happened. It was so bad that when it came to selling their house, they had to disclose that. And they had to disclose the fact that, oh, you know what, I'm selling this house to you, but you are now responsible for this debt that the HOA has. And it was thousands of dollars that every homeowner had to come up with at some point within a certain period of time to help pay for this. Talk about having a hard time selling your house. If I came across that, I'd be like, nope, moving on, finding another house. What is a homeowner association, aka HOA? A homeowners association is an organization in a subdivision, planned community, or condominium building that makes and enforces rules for the properties and residents. Those who purchase property within an HOA's jurisdiction automatically become members and required to pay dues known as HOA fees. Some associations can be very restrictive about what members can do with their properties. And that last part is what everybody fears. Being on the board that I was on, the subject of fines came up quite a bit. What can we fine people for? Can we call it a fine? Do we have to call it something else? What is it actually that we are doing? And at what point is a fine necessary or actually, appropriate? There was one guy in our subdivision who literally had not paid his HOA fee for over 10 years. All they ever did was send him a letter and then charge him fees on top of HOA fees he wasn't paying. So here's your fee you're not paying. Here's another fee, and here's a fine. Oh, you're not going to pay any of that? Well, I guess that's okay. Eventually, this guy left because he could no longer afford his house. Because now he had a lien on his house and all of these different legal battles that were going on because he owed thousands of dollars to the HOA. Here's the thing. If you buy a house, you're going to know if it's in an HOA or not. And if you sign the document, you have to pay the fee. And you have to follow the rules. How do you get out of that? Don't buy a house in an HOA. Being on the board, like I said, the lady and I, we were trying to make sure that the other people on the board did not become complete a-holes. Because that could be a thing too. It's like, you do not need to monitor every last thing. And one of the guys did kind of become that, looking over the fence. What's that guy doing? What's that guy driving around the neighborhood to make sure things? I'm like, really? I don't have that kind of time. I really don't. I'm glad you guys have all the time in the world to just drive around and make sure people aren't picking their nose at the wrong time. My final thought on HOAs is they have their place in a subdivision that needs it. One that has a clubhouse or a pool or parks. Someone needs to keep track of that stuff. Someone needs to pay the taxes for the property. Someone needs to maintain those things. And if you don't have an HOA, you're going to have one or two people that give a crap and the rest are going to be like, I don't care. I'm not paying for that. But HOAs can also be a pain because you can get these little tyrants who knock on your door and tell you the light on your garage is burnt out. That's none of your business. Okay? So, HOAs. Guess what? I'm done with that thought.